Hi guys, this is Zach from Watches on You, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the new Breitling Navitimer 46. So Breitling recently updated their Navitimer collection, and I think they brought some good changes to the model. So going right off the bat here, I'm going to talk about the dial on this timepiece. So the dial is a beautiful glossy green sunray dial that I haven't really seen on any watches before. So the sunray itself is very similar in shade and kind of aesthetic to the dial that's on the green dial Breitling for Bentley Premier. However, they added a new kind of lacquer glossy coating to it, which I think just makes it pop even more and looks absolutely stunning. I honestly wish that they apply this to all of their Sunray dials, as I think it really makes this look just that much better. And I think if you see it in person, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about. And you can see a visual comparison here. So this is the Navitimer 41, and we did post a video. We do have a video on this, so please go check our channel out if you're interested in a video on that. However, you can see the blue dial on here is a matte finish, and it really just doesn't have kind of the depth that the green dial has with its glossy finish. So I really hope that they add it to this and the other Navitimer models that don't have it yet. So going back to this timepiece, the other change that you can notice is the applied logo. So it brings back the vintage styled AOPA logo that was on the original Navitimers, and that's the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. So that was kind of who the Navitimer was originally made for when it was originally introduced as a Breitling model many decades ago. So I really like kind of that nod to the Navitimer's heritage, and I think it does look nicer as well than the previous logo that was on this timepiece. So now going into the technical details of the watch, it features the Breitling B01 movement, which they feature in all of their 369 oriented chronographs. And this movement has a 70-hour power reserve. It's a column wheel chronograph movement and functions very nicely. The buttons have a very nice feeling to them. They feel very sturdy. The movement itself, when you click it, feels extremely solid. It's not as smooth as some chronographs, but I don't know if that's actually what they were going for, because it has more of a solid feel, I would say, rather than delicate, like the delicate super high-end Patek Philippe column wheel chronographs do. So it depends on what your preferences is, but I think it does feel quite nice, especially for a pilot kind of sports watch. So now you can see the movement actually as well through the exhibition caseback, and I really appreciate the inclusion of exhibition casebacks, as now with modern technology, pretty much anyone, as long as you're not talking about a super deep diving watch, you can pretty much include an exhibition caseback on any watch and not have to worry about any kind of other ramifications. So I really appreciate it when manufacturers try to include them, as I think not only does it help us watch people in just being able to see the mechanics of the watch, which obviously is super interesting, it also helps get people that maybe just buy the watch because they see it and think it looks cool into actually appreciating the mechanics of it a lot more than as if you can't see the movement. Because when you see that for the first time, it generally wows people, just the mechanical complexity and the function behind a mechanical watch. So I think it's a very good, also just kind of for the watch community in general, with manufacturers starting to include the exhibition casebacks. So now I'm going to move on to a wrist shot. So on the wrist, this watch, I would say, feels quite large in diameter, obviously. Being 46, that's a hefty timepiece. So I generally like to put my sports watches at like 40 millimeters. I think that's like the ideal size. So I actually more prefer the 41 millimeter Navitimer. However, if you're looking for a large watch, this is actually quite a nice fitting one, especially due to its 13.9 millimeter thickness, which for a 46 millimeter watch is quite thin, especially when you consider that a decent amount is in that domed crystal that you can see, which I do very much like the look of. So it really does wear as good as a 46 millimeter watch can. So if you have a small wrist, this definitely might be an issue for you, but if you have a larger wrist and a large watches appeal to you, I think you should definitely check this size out just to see if you'd like it. I have about a 7.5 inch wrist for reference, so you can compare that to your own. Now, finally, I'm going to show the last aspect of the Navitimer, and that is the slide rule bezel. So it's a bi-directional bezel. It does not click. It's free rotating. It feels absolutely it feels great. The bezel just feels super smooth, but also again solid. There's no, I guess, vibrations in it. It's just totally solid and smooth going back and forth. And the purpose of that bezel is to be a slide rule, which allows you. It's a mathematical tool that lets you do calculations and unit conversions. So you can see, for example, you can convert between miles and kilometers. I believe you can do gallons, liters, and you can just do a lot of different mathematical functions with slide rules. So it's not really used too much in the modern day with the commonality of calculators. However, when the Navitimer originally came out, it was used for navigation calculations and other just kind of calculations that a pilot might need to carry out. So it's a very cool inclusion and is definitely something that still can be used. So if you do have this, I would recommend learning how to use a slide rule, as it's quite interesting. So overall, this watch though does come in at a price of $9,200, which is fairly high. Now, is it worth that though? I would say yes, because when you compare this watch, the Navitimer is a lot of times compared to the Moonwatch. However, I think that's a pretty unfair comparison. The Moonwatch comes in at a much lower price, and also I would say you don't get nearly the quality that you do in a Navitimer. And I think if you're unsure of that, definitely come and see a Navitimer in person. Just the finishing, for example, just the polished hands, indices, and the case finishing, just everything is definitely to a higher level than the base Moonwatch. So I think a much more fair comparison, if you want to compare this to Omega's, would be Omega's higher end Speedmaster models, the bi-compacts models well, now the Moonwatch features a master coaxial, but the previous master coaxial Speedmasters, I would say, is like the Speedmaster Racing. Those are a much more fair comparison, and I think this fits in very well with those. So those come in, I believe, mostly in the 8,000, 9,000 range. And I think that this fits in very nicely with those. I would say this is even, again, up to a bit of a higher standard than those. So I think that the pricing is quite justified with this. It's just whether you're willing to part with this high of an amount of money for this watch. So if you'd like to come and see this watch, I highly recommend that you do. If you're interested at all, I recommend that you come into your nearest Breitling AD. If you're in Minnesota, you should come into Continental Diamond in St. Louis Park. They lent us this watch for the purpose of this review. So I would just like to thank you guys for watching, and remember to like, subscribe, and share.